A lathe is going to use a line and basically extrude that line around an axis. So think of something like a martini glass, which is what we're going to make first. We would make the outline of the martini glass and then revolve it around an axis to get the entire glass. So we'll start with the martini glass, and then we'll work on some parts for our tank that we'll be making. We'll be starting with a line, and so we'll go to Create Shapes under Splines and Line. And I'm going to work here on my front viewport, and just so you can see it, I'm going to expand this front viewport out. A couple things about our viewport. This black line here is the center or the 0 axis, the same with this one. This line here is usually the ground axis. We're not going to pay too much attention to that right now, but we will be paying attention to this 0 axis right here. And I'm going to start making my line, and you'll see the outline of a martini glass appear as I create the line. And make that round right there. We'll come down. I got to remember what a martini glass looks like. There we go. Down something like. Trying to think what would look good. There we go. Let's do that. We'll come down here. Kind of round this out here, and we'll put a little decoration right in here in our little glass. Then we'll come down to the base, and we'll just kind of wrap the base down here. And I'm pulling on that left mouse button as I click to create the curved lines. And now I'm done, and I'll right-click to stop the line. So this is going to be the outside profile of my martini glass. Now, if you want to adjust anything in this profile, we'll come back and do that after, because it's actually a little bit easier to do it later in the process than now. Okay, now we're going to create a lathe. And lathe is under Modify. You'll see here's our line right there. And I'll drop this down until I see lathe, this one. Click that. And what it's going to do is kind of make this mess, basically. Because Max doesn't really know what axis we want to revolve this around. Right now it's just going down the middle of our line. Not usually at all what we want to work with. What we do when we get something that's not what we want is hit these buttons right here. This is the direction. So we know that on the y-axis is the proper direction, although if you drew it in your top viewport, you might have to hit these buttons. And minimum, center, and max are the different choices on where to put that center axis of the lathe. You'll see it right there. So as I hit center and minimum, you'll see that that axis is turning or is moving with each one. Usually by hitting these buttons right here, you'll get the shape that you're after one way or the other. Now I'm going to go to Smooth Highlights, and I'm going to rotate this a little bit and hit G to get rid of my grid, just so I can see what it is that I'm working with. Now there's a couple things I don't like about it. The base I think is too big. It's too angular. You'll see the angles there. And in general, I'm not real happy with this little stem piece here. So I'm also going to click over here and go to Edged Faces so that I can see what I'm working with. And now I'm going to go back down to Line and hit Show End Result. And somewhere in here, if I spin this around, where is it? I'm not seeing what I want here. Line. Oh, there we go. Okay, I need to drop this down. I forgot. You got to drop the little plus button down. Make sure this Show End Result button is on. And I'm going to go to Vertex. What I was looking for is this orange line that's right there. Hopefully you'll see it on the video. But there's an orange line there, and you can see the vertexes right there. I'm going to grab these vertexes down here in the base. I'm going to rotate this around a little bit so you can see what's happening right there. And I'm going to move them in and see how the base will shrink a little bit. Okay, I'm going to grab this vertex right here in the stem piece, and I'm going to expand that out a little bit. I'm going to grab this piece right here and pull it up a little bit. And there's a vertex down here, and I'm going to push that down a little bit. And I think that makes for a little bit more nicer looking glass. Now it's still very angular. I'm going to turn off vertex. I'm going to go back up here under lathe, and I'm looking for the segments. It's right here. And you'll see if I ramp the segments up, it will get smoother. And I want it to be smoother, but remember, we don't want to waste polygons when we work on our tank. So for our little martini glass, you can make it as smooth as you want. So there you go. Also, if your martini glass looked like this, and you're kind of looking at it, it looks like it's an optical illusion, you can't really figure out what's going on there, that's the flip normals button under lathe. And you can flip that. Sometimes when it does the lathe, it either revolves backwards, depending on how you drew out the line, or it doesn't know which way out is facing. And that's what flipping normals will do. The normal is the face, the direction of each of those little faces. So it just needs to be flipped. Okay? So there's our little glass. And if I render this, you'll see we have a nice little martini glass there. I'm going to, don't need to save it. If you want to save your martini glass, it's right there. But I'm going to reset this, and next I'm going to make a piece for our tank. So I'm going to go back to create, shapes, splines, line. And this time, I'm going to go down here, here. You'll see what this will be once I drag it out. And what you'll see here is I'm not going to try and be perfect with this. I'm just going to drag it out. And if you hold down Shift, it makes a straight line. And that's actually what I want in this case. And what I'm going to do here is make a gun. And that's going to be my outline. So I'll go to Modifiers, Lathe. It's not going to lathe it correctly. It's a very skinny gun. I'm going to hit Minimum. Not bad, but not what I wanted. Center and Max. That's actually what I was after. We'll go to Smooth Highlight so we can see what we've got. Not bad. I'm going to hit G, get rid of the grid. There's the front of the gun right there. And then if we want to get in here and adjust it, we go down to Line, Vertex, hit Show End Result, spin this guy around until we see that orange line, and then we'll just adjust the vertexes. And in my case, it's going to be a lot easier. I'm going to hit the F key to change this to front. And I'm going to right-click on each of these and hit Grid, because I don't want the grid on. Just my preference. And what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to make these all smooth highlighted so that I can see what I'm doing. I think front's going to help me the most. There's that orange line I'm after. And I'm on Vertex, Show End Result, and now I'm going to go in here to these lines and adjust them a little bit. That's what I was after. I want a longer gun on it. And I can adjust these pieces a little bit just to make it a little bit more interesting. I think if we balloon those out a little bit, it'll look good. And I think I'm going to make the base a little bit wider. So there's our gun. Spin that around so you can kind of see what it looks like. Oh, the little hole here is a little too small. So I'm going to grab these two and move them in. See how the hole will get wider? Don't flip the pieces through each other. So don't like flip-flop them. And what I mean by that is, let me get in close here. And watch the top of this gun. Zoom out a little bit here. gun is not behaving. There we go. Okay. Watch the top of this gun. What I was talking about when I said don't flip them inside out is don't do that. See how they're flipped inside out? You want to keep them nice and lined up. And I'm going to turn off vertex, go up to lathe. I'm going to add a few more segments to this so that it's nice and round. If I go to edge faces, you'll see those segments. It's not uncommon to have this look a little jagged, something like that if we were making games. Because that's pretty low poly, although not particularly low poly, but low enough for our needs. So there's my gun. That's the front end of like a howitzer or something that I made there. Although it's pink and it should be gray because that'll look much better. Oh yeah, much more army-like. There we go. And there's my gun. So you could lathe a gun. You can lathe things like wheels. You can lathe anything you can imagine for your tank, but it has to be perfectly round. The lathe basically will revolve it around the axis. One last thing, and that's this degrees. It doesn't actually have to go all the way around. You can actually make it go halfway around, and then 3/4 if you want, but 360 is the highest it will go. Okay? There you go. That's lathe.